Welcome to the second week of the playoffs. Let's just jump right into it. Okay, here we have the half-season scores. I fixed up a few things, but we're going to move right on past this. Going to look at the averages here. I've also fixed this up. There was a few errors in it. And we could see like Johnny crushing Mike, Kelso, Brian, Chad. But here we have some pie charts. Here we can see that Chad actually got most of his points from Andrew and Ryan, where he lost most of his points from Brody, Johnny, Brian, and Adrian. A little bit from Craig, a little bit from Jeff, a little bit from me, and a little bit from Jazz. Jazz's gains, she gets most of her points from Adrian, then Kelso, then Brian, Craig, me, and then some small pieces. Where she lost most of her points was Brody, then Craig, Adrian, then me, Jeff. Andrew's gains, most of his points come from Jeff, then Kelso, and then Brody, and then a pretty fair chunk from almost everyone else. Andrew's losses come from Chad, Mike, and Adrian. Brody got most of his points out of Chad and Jazz's team, followed up by Brian and Ryan. He got most of his losses from Adrian, Johnny, Andrew, and Jeff. Mike, Craig, and Kelso are also involved, I guess. Johnny got most of his points from Kelso, Mike, and Chad, and everyone else. Most of his losses come from Adrian, Andrew, and Brody. Adrian gained most of his points from Brody, Chad, Johnny, Andrew, Jazz, just about everyone. Pretty fair chunk. He lost most of his points from Brian and Jazz, though. Also, Mike and Jeff. Craig gained most of his points from Ryan, Jazz, Mike, and Chad. A little bit from Adrian, and small chunks from a few other. Most of Craig's losses come from Kelso and Brian, and just a pretty fair chunk for everybody else, except for Brody, who he only lost 3 points to. Mike's gains come from Andrew, Ryan, Adrian, Kelso, Jazz, Brian, and Brody, whereas his losses come mostly from Johnny, a chunk from Jeff, and a big chunk from Craig and Adrian. Kelso gained most of his points from Craig, Adrian, Ryan, and Brody, whereas most of his losses come from Johnny, Jazz, Mike, Andrew, and Jeff. Brian got most of his points from Adrian, Craig, and Chad, but from Johnny. Brian's losses come pretty evenly from almost everyone, mostly Jazz, Johnny, and Brody, Andrew, Jeff. Jeff gained most of his points pretty evenly across the board, getting most of them from Mike, followed by Adrian, Brody, and Chad. A majority of Jeff's losses come from Andrew, then Johnny, Kelso, and Ryan, Jazz making up a small chunk. Ryan gained most of his points from Jazz, followed up by Andrew, Brian, Jeff, and Chad. Most of my losses, however, come from everybody, but the largest chunk being Craig and Chad. Tripped on the blue line and Derbytron made it to the next round, meaning Jazz and Brody are going to have to go at it for 5th place. I'm predicting Flying V and Derbytron will win the next round. In the Championship League, Stone Kelso's and Austin 316 to fight the 11th place, 12th place game. I'm predicting South Park Cows and the King Captains advance to the next level. Having a look at the head-to-head scores and the buys, the first 4 bars represent the teams going head-to-head, separated by a space. The final 4 bars represent the people during the bye week. We're going to flip through these and see how everyone did during the playoff week. We can see when it comes down to fantasy points, Tripped on the blue line made the most points with over 225 points. I'm just going to let these play through. Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. Tune in next time. See ya.